Innovation requires entirely new workflows. And you've heard about it already this morning, and you'll hear more about it. It isn't enough just to switch from paper to digital. It isn't enough to get rid of those homegrown Excel spreadsheets you've been using now for decades, but it will require entirely new ways of thinking about your workflows. Look at the original industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution, we're using steam motors to power manufacturing. Now, steam motors were big, cumbersome, and then from that, they would drive a single steel shaft. We would connect gears and belts, and off of that single steel shaft coming out of that steam motor, we would be able to drive punches and presses and looms. Now, steam motors were efficient, but only if you were close to the power. So the further you got away from that steam motor, the less efficient, the less reliable that power became. 1881, Thomas Edison introduces his electricity generating concept on Pearl Street, New York City. And then we start to move electricity into the manufacturing process. No longer were we reliant on a single motor. We could now have many small motors. See, small steam engines weren't very efficient, but small electric motors were very efficient. Rather than distributing power through pulleys and gears, we could use wires. And so it allowed us to reconfigure the manufacturing process. Rather than being focused on huddling around this large steam engine, we could start to realign things around the logic of production. We could bring light and safety into these environments. And you see the legacy of the steam engines. All you have to do is go to New York City and look at their old manufacturing districts. All the buildings are square. They're about 6 stories, 8 stories tall, because they put the steam motor right in the middle, and from that drive shafts to either end of the building going up and down floors. But as we started to introduce electricity, we could reconfigure that. We also empowered the individual. Rather than being subject to the power of the steam engine, we could now have a worker who was more autonomous, who could drive their speed. We started to talk about worker productivity. And it forced us to rethink how we hired, how we trained, how we paid. All of those things, second-order effects, simply because we changed the source of power. As we enter the 1920s, mind you, 40 years after the introduction of Thomas Edison's original electric power stations, we start to see the productivity gains really kick in. The US economy grows 42% in the 1920s, largely because of manufacturing, and because we could take the power that we had been using, reconfigure it, and see all of these second-order effects kick in. And I would argue as we move from digitization to datification, that's exactly what's going to happen in all of your organizations if you rework your workflows, if you rethink the processes that you have long followed, if you take advantage of the technologies that are available and restructure how you do work, then you can unleash those same productivity capabilities that were unleashed in the 1920s or in subsequent iterations of innovation.